Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kari, and today I'm going to be doing a huge book gift giving guide. So hopefully this will be able to help you when you're out doing your holiday shopping this December, if you're hoping to buy books or bookish gifts for people in your life this year. So I have lots of ideas. I've divided them up into categories so that we can cover probably almost anyone in your life. However, I will say that even though I've put people into like categories, that doesn't mean that somebody else outside of that category wouldn't like that book. I mean, I like all of these books that I'm going to recommend, and I'm not a dad, for example, or a brother. So just because a specific book is in a specific category for someone in your life, that absolutely does not mean that someone else in your life that doesn't fit into this category wouldn't like that book. That's absolutely not the case. I'm just trying to make it easier that if there's someone specific in your life that you're looking for a book for and you have absolutely no idea what to get them, I want to make it easier for you so that you can find someone for that particular person in your life. Because like I said, I like all of these books even though I don't fit into some of the categories, but I just want to make it easier for you. So with all of that out of the way, I'm going to cover a bunch of different people in your life that you could be shopping for and what books I would recommend getting those particular people in your life. But I'll also put at the end other bookish gifts, like objects that aren't books that make great gifts as well. So stick around for that if you're interested for that as well. So like I said, this video will be divided into type of person that you're shopping for. However, this first portion is going to be books that you could buy for literally anyone. You could adapt it to anyone. So for this one, I really just have one recommendation, but there's many different ways to interpret it, because you could take anyone's favorite book or book series and get them a really nice collectible edition of that book. So for example, I have the A Song of Ice and Fire or the Game of Thrones book series here, and these are special edition faux leather bound books, and these are absolutely beautiful. So if you have an A Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones fan in your life, I would definitely recommend these faux leather bound editions. But of course that works for many other series as well, not just the Game of Thrones. So if you already know what somebody's favorite series is, you could definitely check out getting a nice special collector edition of those books. And in the same vein, if you just know the person's favorite book and it's a classic, for example, I would definitely recommend getting the Penguin Clothbound Classics editions. These books are pieces of art designed by Coralie Bickford Smith. So as you can see here, I have Emma by Jane Austen, Jabberwocky, which is Alice in Wonderland poems by Lewis Carroll, 1984 by George Orwell, and Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. But these are just 4 of the many classics that they have in this collection. So if someone in your life has a favorite collection, I would definitely recommend checking out if the Penguin Clothbound Classics collection has a copy, because I'm pretty sure they would if it's a classic. So these make excellent gifts. And the last set of books that I would recommend for anyone, especially if they're a fan of a particular classic, are these Harvard Press annotated editions. They're really big books. They're like coffee table books basically, but they're annotated by Harvard Press. So here you can see the black text is where the story is itself. This is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. But in the margins, you can see that there's been annotations to give more context to the story. And you get so much information in these margins. Every page has more margins of information. And you even sometimes get pictures like this, for example, like newspaper cuttings. So these can be really interesting reads if there's someone who's a huge fan of a particular classic in your life. So here I have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and Emma, also by Jane Austen. So as I said, these make absolutely beautiful gifts, and they're just perfect coffee table books for classics fans in your life. So those were the ideas that I feel like can be adapted to just about anybody in your life, but next I'm going to move on to more specific types of people that you could be looking for books for. Again, keep in mind that people outside of these categories could absolutely love these books, but I just want to help point you in a particular direction if you're really not sure where to start for a particular person. So first I'm going to recommend some books for your mom or your mother figure in your life. A lot of these books I actually recommended to my own mom, so they've been mom approved in my life, so I feel pretty confident recommending a lot of these. So my first recommendation is Educated by Tara Westover. This is a nonfiction book about a woman who grows up in an extremist family. Her parents don't trust the government, so she is never sent to school, and this is about her pursuit trying to get an education. Next we have The Push by Ashley O'Drain. This book I would classify as like a mystery suspense story. It follows the mom Blythe, who has a daughter, but this daughter doesn't really connect to Blythe emotionally the way that she's expecting, and she starts to wonder if something's wrong with her daughter. Then Blythe goes on to have a second child, a son, and this child is emotionally attached to Blythe the way that she was expecting for her first child to be attached to her. And so this just kind of amplifies her concern that something is wrong with her daughter. Next we have a book that was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction this year, and that's Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. So Sorrow and Bliss follows a 40-something protagonist, and she's starting to wonder if she's happy in her marriage and if she made the right decision when she was younger to be with this man. Also, there's a huge theme of mental health in this book, and the protagonist thinking back to her teenage years and how people didn't really take her seriously when she was a teenager, when she was struggling with her mental health, and now what are the effects of that now that she's in her 40s. It's kind of uncommon to read about protagonists who are in their 40s, so that's why I think someone who's older would really appreciate a book like this focusing on an older protagonist. Next we have another nonfiction, and it's Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So this follows Chanel Miller, who was sexually assaulted at Stanford, and it follows her story from her wanting to remain anonymous at the beginning of the news coverage of what happened to her eventually wanting to put her name name on the story and to get her story out there to help more victims, and also just the trial coverage of what happened to her and trying to convict the man who assaulted her. This is a super emotional read, but very captivating. Next, we have a book that came out very, very recently within the last month, and it's We Spread by Ian Reid. Again, similarly to Sorrow and Bliss, which follows a 40-something protagonist, We Spread follows a woman who's like 80 years old or something. I don't really remember exactly how old she is, but she's quite old. And it follows her losing her husband and living at home, and it becoming really not safe for her to live at home, and grappling with the idea of moving into a retirement home. It's a really good examination of growing older and how it affects you when you start to lose your memory. It's a great examination of all that. However, this is still like a mystery suspense story, so there's a bit of a darkness to this story as well. Next, we have Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This takes place in like the near dystopic future where little kids are raised with like a robot friend. They call them artificial friends. These artificial friends are supposed to help them with their emotional growth into young adulthood. So this story follows Josie, who is a young girl trying to select her artificial friend, but it also follows her mom. And how does the mom help this young girl grow up in this world where potential and being the best that you can be are so important and so stressed on young people? So obviously, since there's like a robot AI aspect to this, this is a tiny bit science fiction, but it doesn't rule the story. It's more of a character study between this young girl and her robot, and then the mom, the young girl, and the robot. The next book that I would recommend is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. So you've probably seen this book talked about a lot on the internet recently, so I won't go into too much details, but I would recommend this for your mom. So this is a nonfiction book written by the actress Jeanette McCurdy. Even if your mom doesn't know who Jeanette McCurdy is, I would still really recommend this book because when I read it, I didn't know who she was and I really enjoyed it. I just think it's a really great story. Or maybe she does know who Jeanette McCurdy is because maybe you watched that show when you were younger and she would say, oh yeah, I remember that girl from that show that you watched. But either way, I would really recommend this story because it really examines Jeanette McCurdy's relationship with her mom and how her mom was basically the most horrible type of stage mom ever. And finally, my last recommendation for moms or mother figures is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So this follows a young girl named Addie in 18th century France. And basically she's being forced to marry this man that she doesn't want to marry, and she ends up making a deal with the devil that she doesn't have to marry this man. However, she's going to be cursed to live forever. And when anyone meets her, as soon as she's out of their sight, they forget her. So she accepts this offer so that she doesn't have to marry this man that she doesn't want to. And then we follow her for hundreds of years after this because she can't die. She's immortal. And how does this aspect of as soon as she's out of someone's sight, they forget her, how does that affect her? So those were all my recommendations for moms or mother figures. And next I'm going to move to dads or father figures. First, I'm going to recommend the A Song of Ice and Fire series. I've already talked about these books, but I do think that they would be a great recommendation for your dad or father figure in your life. Maybe your dad watched the Game of Thrones TV series and really enjoyed it, so maybe he would enjoy the books, or maybe he's watching House of the Dragon right now and really enjoy seeing what comes after the Targaryen reign. This is truly an excellent fantasy series, and even someone like me who would absolutely not consider themselves a fantasy reader love these books. So even if your dad doesn't have experience reading fantasy, I think that these are a great way for him to dive into it. Basically, just to give you a little synopsis, this series is about the fight to be king of the 7 kingdoms and who has the right to be king, who doesn't have the right to be king. But it's so much more than that. You follow so many different characters that you get really attached to, and all these different characters all over this world are intertwined somehow. So it's really, really fun to see how each of these characters intertwine and how they all connect to each other, how their stories all connect. It's a really, really fun read. Next, I would recommend your dad or father figure dystopian books. Here in particular, I have the Vintage Dystopian collection, which includes Brave New World, The Handmaid's Tale, and 1984. They're a really cool collection. Also, you get the red sprayed edges, which is really nice. So I don't think you can go wrong with dystopian classics for a dad or father figure, particularly this collection, which is really nice. Next, I have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This actually won the 2021 Women's Prize for Fiction. So this is a short fantasy story about Piranesi, who lives in this house that's infinite. Every day he tries to go out and explore and learn more about this huge house that he lives in, because there are rooms that are full of statues and pillars, and he tries to count each of these statues and notice the differences between each of the statues. And there's rooms where the ocean is in the room. Like, it's a completely fantastical house. But there is someone else who lives in the house with him, and Piranesi calls this person the other. So once a week, Piranesi meets with the other to tell the other everything that he's learned about the house that week. But there's this really big mystery about what is this house? Why is he there? Who is the other? It's really just a captivating, fun, mysterious little fantasy book. Next, if your dad is a history buff, I would definitely recommend Mouse by Art Spiegelman. This is actually a non-fiction graphic novel. So Art Spiegelman's parents were actually put into concentration camps during the Holocaust, and Art Spiegelman has put their story, particularly his dad's story, into graphic novel form. And it's a really interesting art style because he portrays the Nazis as cats and the Jews as mice. So not only is this a really great read, it's really educational as well. Next we have Dune by Frank Herbert. So this is one of the most famous science fiction stories of all time, so maybe your dad has already read it and he really liked it, which in that case I would recommend getting him this special edition because it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, look at these teal sprayed edges, they're so cool. And also on the inside of the jacket, there's some really great art, and even on the end pages as well. So if your dad is already a fan of Dune, I would recommend this edition, but maybe he's never read or watched the adaptations of Dune. In that case, I would still really recommend this story because it's one of the most well-loved science fiction stories ever. Next, if your dad loves cooking, I would recommend Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. So maybe your dad used to watch the Anthony Bourdain show when it was on before he passed away, and so this would be a really interesting companion book to that. Or maybe your dad enjoys cooking and would just really enjoy hearing about this super famous chef and seeing how he started at these really low positions in kitchens and how he became this super well-known, well-respected chef. And finally, I have House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. So if your dad is a horror fan, I cannot recommend this more. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This is about a man who moves into a house with his family that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. So he's really confused about this, and he tries to have these experts come in and examine the house to figure out what is going on. But it's so much more than that because we have multiple timelines. Not only do we have this timeline of this man living in the house, learning about all the research that he's doing, but we also have another timeline a few generations after that about this man wanting to make that story into a movie. Then we have a third timeline about this man reading the notes from the man who wants to make a movie and seeing all the thoughts that he had about this house, but then also reading firsthand the notes about this house of the man who's living in the house. That sounds kind of complicated. It's really not that complicated, but this is a really immersive read. I've talked about this book before and how unique it is, but basically there's all different kinds of text. There's pages where the margins are full of text, things you have to read backwards, things you have to read sideways. There's pages with almost no words on it, with text that has been crossed out, a letter that's written in secret code and you have to decode the letter, transcripts, all different kinds of stuff, and it just makes for a really unique reading experience. Alright, next we're going to talk about books that you could get your sister, your best friend, your girlfriend, anyone like this. These are the books that I would recommend that you pick up for them. First, I would recommend Animal by Lisa Taddeo. So if your best friend, sister, girlfriend, etc. really likes books about female rage, I cannot recommend Animal more. This book would be considered literary fiction, and it follows Joan, who lives in New York City, and basically right at the beginning of the story, her boyfriend commits suicide right in front of her. So obviously this is very traumatic for her, and she ends up leaving New York City and moving west to California. And while we're reading, we understand that she's out in California looking for somebody, but we don't know who. But as I said before, if you know somebody that loves stories about female rage, I cannot recommend this one more. It's really perfect for that. Next, we have one of my favorite books of all time, and that's Bunny by Mona Awad. If you have someone in your life that can really appreciate a weird story, I cannot recommend this book more. It is very weird, but I say that with love. It's an excellent type of weird. So this story follows Samantha, who is in university. She's taking writing classes where there's this other group of girls who are super close to each other, and they're kind of like the preppy, snobby girls, and they all call each other Bunny. So Samantha really hates these girls, and she makes fun of them all the time to her best friend. But then one day the bunnies invite Samantha to come hang out with them. Samantha's best friend is like, why would you go hang out with them? Don't you hate them? But she ends up going and hanging out with them just to see what they're like. I cannot recommend this book more for someone who appreciates a weird story in your life. I love this book. Next we have a nonfiction. It's called Cultish by Amanda Montell. So this is a study of how cult leaders and cult-like groups use language to entice people to join them. So this examines specific cults who have actually existed in our history and how their leaders used language to get more people to join their cult, but it also examines things today that we wouldn't really consider cults, but Amanda Montell is arguing that the way the leaders use language are acting very cult-like. So, you know, she talks about things like MLMs, Peloton, CrossFit, Lululemon. Now, obviously MLMs are very different than Lululemon, CrossFit, Peloton, but the point that she's trying to make is that all these groups use language to draw more people in and to buy their product. So this is a very interesting read for anyone in your life who's interested in language or cults. Next, I have a graphic novel called Brazen by Penelope Bajou. This is a graphic novel that examines many different women through history who have, as the cover would say, rocked the world. So this is a really fun, historical, feminist look on history to see who are the female figures in history who have shaped that history and have even influenced our culture today. The art is really cute as well. Next, we have a classic, and it's The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. So this is kind of in the same vein as is Animal by Lisa Taddeo, that if you have someone in your life who's interested in female rage and women going against the grain, because the main character in this book is a young woman who doesn't want to get married, she doesn't want to have kids, and how does society treat her because she doesn't want these things in her life. This is a really great foundational feminist text. Next I have We Had to Remove This Post by Hannah Borvotes. This is a very short story that follows Hannah, who is a content moderator on a social media platform. She's in charge of removing all of the things that aren't fit to be on social media. So for example, things that are too violent, too sexual, conspiracy theories, things of this nature. But in this short story, it examines how does looking at that stuff all day affect somebody. Next I have Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. This is a nonfiction graphic novel that is about the author growing up during the Iranian Revolution. It follows her from being a young girl before the revolution and how her life was before the revolution, and then what happens to her once the revolution starts, and what do her parents do to help protect her from what's happening. This book was actually super educational for me, and I would really recommend it for anyone. Next we have Madam by Phoebe Wynne. If you have a sister, best friend, girlfriend, etc. who loves dark academia, I would really recommend Madam. This follows a teacher who's just been hired at this really prestigious private girls' school, and they never hire new teachers. Like, it's the first time in 10 years, I think, that they've hired a new teacher. And so we're from the point of view of this new teacher and how she's really treated as an outsider by the other teachers, but also the girls at this school. She starts to think that something's not quite right at this school, and so we follow her trying to figure out what is happening at the school and what happened to the teacher before her that she replaced. And finally, my last recommendation for someone in this category would be Glasstown by Isabel Greenberg. This is an excellent book to get for someone who's a Bronte sister fan, because basically it combines real history about the Bronte sisters and also the children's stories that they wrote as children. It's a really fun book that I would seriously recommend for anyone who enjoys the Bronte sisters' works. Alright, next I have some recommendations for your brother, your boyfriend, your best friend, this type of person. First, I would recommend some Andy Weir books, so either Project Hail Mary or The Martian. So these are both books that take place in outer space, so if someone in your life really enjoys science fiction and space, you can't go wrong with either one of these books. So I would in particular recommend Project Hail Mary for someone in your life who has already read or watched The Martian and really enjoyed it. I think this is a safe bet. But also these two books are just really good options for someone who reads a lot of science fiction or someone who doesn't really read that much science fiction at all. Like, they're perfect choices for either type of profile. Next, I would recommend Tender as the Flesh by Agustina Basterrica. This takes place in a dystopic future where basically we can't eat animals anymore. That all the animals have contracted some kind of disease, and so it would be deadly to eat the animals. So instead of going vegetarian, apparently, these people have decided to start raising humans as cattle. So yes, that means they turn to cannibalism in this dystopic future. So this story follows someone who works at a factory that raises these humans as cattle. Next, I would recommend one of my favorite thriller horror books, which is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This book is about a new couple, and we're in the head of the girl in the relationship. They're in the car on the way for her to meet her new boyfriend's parents, but while they're on the way there, she's starting to wonder if she should end things. Hence the title, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. If you know someone who loves twists, this book has a huge twist, so I would really recommend it for that person in your life. Next, I would recommend one of my favorite books of all time, the dark academia book, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So just in case you don't know what The Secret History is about, we follow Richard, who manages to get accepted to this really prestigious, exclusive Greek, Latin, and classics class at his new university. But in this class, there's only a few other students, and at the beginning he sees them as really pretentious and horrible people, but over time he becomes really close to them. And from the very first page, we understand that this group of friends has murdered one of the other friends. It's kind of like a reverse murder mystery. So instead of like a whodunit, because we know who done it from the first page, it's kind of like a why done it. Like, we rewind and find out why they ended up murdering one of their own friends. Next, we have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This takes place in a world where basically you can go into a video game, and so this follows the main character Wade, who goes into a particular video game, and the game is to be able to find this ultimate prize that the creator has put into the game. But generations of people have tried to find this prize and no one has. So this follows Wade fighting to be the person to finally find that prize. And finally, I would recommend a new release this year from Otessa Moshfegh, which is Lapvona. So this is a book that takes place in the Middle Ages, and it follows a little boy named Merrick. So Merrick lives with his dad, and their living conditions are really horrible. Think about poor people in the Middle Ages, how they would live. That's how Merrick and his dad live. But obviously at this time there was a king, and the king, he lives this really lavish lifestyle. And even though all of his subjects don't have any more water, the king wastes water and like fills up his moat and doesn't give a crap that his subjects don't have any water. So this story follows the connection between the peasants and Merrick and his dad, and then this king who has all this privilege and his son that has all this privilege, and how does that come to a head? So I would recommend this for someone who loves historical fiction and isn't grossed out out by disgusting things, because there are a lot of disgusting things in this story, so just be warned of that. Alright, next I have some recommendations for the young people in your life. So whether that's your own kids or nieces, nephews, etc., just the young people in your life. Alright, so first are some books that I think could be good for young people of any age, and that's the Harry Potter Jim K illustrated editions. So here I have the first 4, and the 5th one was actually just released, so you could in theory give the first 5 books. Books 6 and 7 are coming in the future. So here I have Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the Chamber of Secrets, Prisoner of Azkaban, and the Goblet of Fire. I'm gonna set these down because they're super freaking heavy. So as I said, I think that these could be given to a young person of any age, because these are just really excellent collectible books that even if you give it to someone who's 1 year old, when they grow up, they're going to be able to appreciate and read from these beautiful editions. Or you could give it to someone who's a young adult who already loves the story and they would love looking at the illustrations in these books. These are truly beautiful collectible editions, and the quality is just astounding. I think that these books can be passed down generation to generation because they're just so stunning. They are heavy coffee table books with some beautiful illustrations inside. And as I said, book 5 was just released, and book 6 and 7 are planned to be coming out in the future. So, you know, maybe next Christmas you could get book 6, for example. Would highly recommend these books for the young people in your life. Next, I have Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien. So Tolkien, I imagine you already know, wrote The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And so every year Tolkien wrote these letters to his children as if he were Santa Claus, and his children collected these letters over the years and put them into this collection. So this is a really fun book, again, that I think could be appreciated by children of all ages. I mean, especially younger ages, but it could become like a nice tradition to read every year, so would still be appreciated by older kids, because it's really fun to read these letters and see the illustrations that Tolkien did. And I think that this could be a fun tradition to start, like maybe you read this book every year on Christmas Eve. Next, I would recommend The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. This is a super cute illustrated book full of life lessons. The art isn't necessarily my favorite, but I love the lessons, and the little animals are pretty cute. Again, I think this could be appreciated by young people of all ages and even adults, because I'm not gonna lie, I did tear up reading this one. Next, for younger kids, I would recommend this Paris Hide and Seek. It's basically like a Where's Waldo, but for Paris. And on each page, they have a different monument of Paris, and you're supposed to find something particular on that page. And for each monument, they do give you a little bit of history, so it is educational as well. Next, I would recommend these Puffin and Bloom edition books. I actually only have 2 of the 4 books because the other 2 books in the series I have in a different edition. But here I have Anne of Green Gables and Heidi. These are just super cute books of classics for young readers in your life. Next, for young readers in your life, I would recommend Holes by Louis Sekar. So this is about a young boy who gets falsely accused of a crime, and he gets sent off to this camp as punishment. And at this camp, the #1 rule is that every day, each of the campers, which are other young people who have been accused of a crime, they have to dig a hole every single day. They have a shovel, and their hole has to be as deep as the shovel and as wide as the shovel. And if they find anything when they dig, they have to give it to the camp counselors. That's the only thing that they have to do every day, and they can spend the rest of the day as they like. But while Stanley, the main character, is doing this every day, he starts to learn more and more about the history of this camp and of this region that the camp is on. Next, if you want to get a younger reader into classics, I cannot recommend The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien enough. Also, there are some really fun editions of this book, so you can find a really special edition to gift to a younger reader so that they can fall in love with the world of Middle-earth. Next, for young readers who are a bit more mature, I would say, because this book is kind of freaky, but that's Coraline by Neil Gaiman. This story follows Coraline, who lives in a house with her parents, and then one day she discovers that the other side of her house kind of has this alternate universe. And in this alternate universe, there are people who are basically impersonating her parents. They're like fake versions of her parents, and these fake parents trying to get her to come live with them forever and to leave her real parents behind. Like I said, there are some scary aspects to this story, so make sure you get this for like more of a mature young reader, but it's a really fun story. Next, for the young adult reader in your life, I would recommend We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, and then this year, the prequel came out to We Were Liars, which is Family of Liars. So it would be really fun to get both of these books at the same time for the young adult reader in your life. And they've probably seen this book all over their TikTok feed, so I imagine they'd be really excited to get these books. Alright, the next category is for someone that you don't really know super well, so for example, like a colleague. So I have a few ideas for you here. The first thing I would recommend is a beautiful edition of a classic book. Even if you have no idea what type of books this person likes to read, you can't go wrong getting someone a classic, especially if it's a beautiful edition. It's going to look great on their bookshelf, and they would appreciate that. So here I have the cloth-bound classic edition of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Or you could get them a best-selling nonfiction book, for example, Atomic Habits by James Clear. So this is a book that literally anyone could relate to. Anyone could find a good habit that they would like to start in their life, so this could be relatable to any reader. Again, another type of nonfiction that could be interesting for any reader is Lies My Teacher Told Me by James Lowen. So basically, this book takes events that we all learned about in history class, but gives you way more information and actually debunks a lot of the stereotypes stereotypes that we learned at school. So again, anyone could potentially be interested in this type of book. Another type of book that you could get this type of person that you don't really know too well, but maybe you know one thing that they're interested in, you could always get a really nice book on that topic that they could appreciate. So I just took this book as an example. If you know your colleague is really interested in the Bronte sisters, you could get this huge biography about the Bronte sisters for them. So again, if you know one interest that they have, you could always find a nice book about that interest that they have. And in the same vein, if you know that there's a celebrity that they really like, you could see if that celebrity has a memoir. So for example, I have Trevor Noah's memoir here, which is an excellent memoir, by the way, which could be read by someone who doesn't even know who Trevor Noah is. So I could recommend this to your colleague or someone you don't really know too well, because not only is it a great memoir about Trevor Noah, but it's also a story about apartheid in South Africa. But all that to say, maybe you do know a celebrity that this person is interested in, and you could get that person's memoir. All right, my last category of person before I get to the non-book bookish gifts is for the person who loves Paris, loves France, loves the French language. I had to do this part because if you don't know, I live in Paris and I have a huge passion for French history, French culture, the French language, everything. So I have a bunch of books on this topic, so I thought I would share some good ideas if you have someone in your life like this as well. First, I would recommend just a really beautiful coffee table book. Something that they can put on display on their bookshelf or on their coffee table, in their living room somewhere. A piece that reminds them of how much they love France. So I chose this one, for example. It's about Versailles. It's from the Chateau de Versailles. You can order these types of books from their website. It's really beautiful. It has these gilded edges and it has beautiful pictures inside. So even if you don't get exactly this book, something along the lines of this that they can put on display to show off their love of France or Paris, whatever, is always a good idea. Or if they're more interested in the history side of France, there are beautiful coffee tables about the history of France. So for example, here I have The Sun King's Garden by Ian Thompson. So this book is about the gardens of Versailles and like the political importance that they had to Louis XIV. But really, any beautiful coffee table book would be appreciated by this type of person. Next, a really great history book just about the city of Paris and the history of Paris. I cannot recommend Paris from the Ground Up by James H.S. McGregor more. This is a really digestible history of Paris, and you learn so many things that people don't talk about Paris. Cannot recommend this more for the history buff who loves Paris. Also, for the French history buff in your life, I would recommend something like the Marie Antoinette biography by Stephen Zweig. So this is a really long biography, but it's one of the most respected biographies of Marie Antoinette. So I would definitely recommend something like this. And if you can't tell, I love the Chateau de Versailles, but here we have the biography of the Versailles Castle. So it's called Versailles, A Biography of a Palace by Tony Spofforth. So again, this is just the history of Versailles, the castle itself, and the evolution of it being built and what is it today. And finally, if someone in your life is coming to France on vacation, I would definitely recommend these two books. First, we have Paris in Stride by Jessie Canlos-Wiener, and this one is the official guide of Les Plus Beaux Villages. Now, this one is in French, so it would have to be for someone who reads French or who is interested in translating the book, but I would really recommend this book for someone who's going to road trip around France, because in France they have this designation of the most beautiful village, and that's what this means. Les Plus Beaux Villages means the most beautiful village. So there's kind of like this competition to be named a most beautiful village of France, and this book is a collection of all the villages who have received that title. So it's divided into regions. So for example, if you're doing a road trip in the southeast, you can look at the southeast section and make sure that you fit in some of these beautiful villages along your road trip. Now this one, Paris in Stride, this is in English. This was actually created by an American artist who lives in Paris. So this has really cute watercolor art of Paris in it, but it's not just about the art. This is actually recommendations of places that you should go in Paris. So this book can be used as like a tourist guide of Paris. It points out all the must-see places in Paris while showing you some really beautiful art. All right, so those are all the books that I would recommend getting specific people, but now I want to talk about bookish items that you could get people for this holiday season. So first I would say a bookish tote bag from a famous bookstore around the world. So I'll show you some examples of what I have. So first I have Shakespeare & Company in Paris, because obviously I live in Paris, so this one's pretty easy for me to get, but these can be ordered online. Next I have a tote bag from Books Upstairs in Dublin. And finally I have a tote from the Strand in New York City. I also know that Daunt Books in London has a very cute tote that I want to get my hands on, so that could be interesting as well. So maybe you're close by to a bookshop that has a really cute tote bag, so I would recommend going to pick one of those up for somebody in your life, or you could always order one online from a bookstore that's maybe halfway around the world, but you could still order them online. Next, I would recommend bookish clothes. Now, all of the things except for one shirt is from Joni.com. It's a clothing company based in the UK. I would highly recommend checking out their website. They have some really cute bookish stuff, but not exclusively bookish stuff. So first I have this Pride and Prejudice sweatshirt, also this Wuthering Heights sweatshirt, an Avid Readers Club sweatshirt, a Read More Books sweater, a 1984 sweatshirt, a Wuthering Heights t-shirt, a Read More Books t-shirt, an Avid Readers Club t-shirt, and this bookshelf dress. And finally this last shirt, it's not from Joni, it's actually from Etsy, and it's a shirt that says books. Next, if you know someone that takes books with them, for example on public transportation, I would really recommend a bookcase. So for example, I have this one from Shakespeare and Company, and you can see it's really nice, especially for paperbacks, to put them in this little case so that they don't get damaged in your bag. I know that there's many different types of bookcases that you can get. Some people make some really cute ones on Etsy, for example, but this is always a really good idea for the commuter reader in your life. Next, if you want to be a little creative, you can make like an annotating kit for somebody. So if you know that someone likes to annotate their books, you could put a little kit together for them to make it easy. So you could get them a cute little pencil case like this one I got from Shakespeare and Company, and inside you could put things like highlighters of different sizes and colors, pens of different colors, different size post-it notes, some multicolored tabs, a mini ruler, and just all different kinds of things that somebody could use for annotating. You could put it all in here and make it really cute for them. Also, you obviously can't go wrong getting a reader some bookmarks. They have some really cute ones on Etsy. I got these two, for example, from The Book Leo, who's a booktuber here on YouTube, and this one from Sabine from Sabine's Book Nook here on YouTube as well. But there's lots of different bookmark creators on Etsy, so you should definitely check that out. But also Ariel Bissett and Raylene LeMay, who have a podcast called Books Unbound, they have a bookmark subscription service, and these are some of the bookmarks that I've gotten in their bookmark subscription service. The other ones are actually all in books right now, so I don't have them to show you. But basically every quarter you get 2 bookmarks and 2 stickers, and they get really famous illustrators to do their bookmarks. For example, my 2 favorite are these ones from Coralie Bickford Smith, and she's the one who designed my favorite book editions, the Penguin Clothbound Classics. They got her to design these bookmarks, and these are so stunning. These are my absolute favorite ones that I've gotten so far. But you could always sign someone up for a bookmark subscription service, because that's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving, that every quarter they get 2 new bookmarks and 2 new stickers. Next, you can't go wrong with a good mug. I don't know many readers who don't like to have a nice mug of tea or coffee when they curl up with a book, so you can't go wrong with a mug. So just to show you a few examples of things that I have this Jane Austen mug that has a bunch of quotes from a bunch of different Jane Austen books on it. Penguin has this really cool collection of mugs based on their classics edition. So here I have Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And finally, I have this little baby mug about the Brontes. It has each of the different Brontes on it and then references to the different books that they've written on it. The next thing is probably very obvious, but I did want to mention it just in case that it just completely flew past you, you didn't even think about it, but I wanted to mention to get a Kindle. So even though I very much prefer to read from a physical book, I do love my Kindle because I like to be able to read in bed right before I fall asleep instead of scrolling on my phone. So those are the moments of the day when I use my Kindle. So this could be a really interesting gift for someone who you know is trying to stay off their phone, and this could help them break that habit. And my last recommendation of bookish gifts are a little juvenile, but I still love them anyway. They're pretty fun. And that's the Funko Pop figurines based on bookish characters. So here, for example, I have Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, she even has a little book, Paula Atreides from Dune, Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and again she has a little book, how could I not? This is her library outfit. And finally, Rhaenyra Targaryen from Fire and Blood, or the Game of Thrones book series. So those can be fun little things to give someone to put on their bookshelves, for example. Alright, so that's the conclusion of this book gift giving guide, and also some bookish gifts as well, not just books. I really hope that this was helpful and you were able to come up with a book to get someone in your life that you weren't too sure what to get them. Hopefully this gave you some ideas. And again, like I said at the beginning of the video, just because a particular book was in a section for a particular person, that absolutely does not mean that someone outside of that category wouldn't like that book. I love all of these books and I don't fit into all of these categories, but it was simply here just to point you in the right direction if you have absolutely no idea of what to get someone particular in your life. In the comments below, if you have other recommendations of specific books or types of books that you would recommend for any of the different people categories that I created, put them in the comments below so that we can have even more ideas. So if you would like even more ideas, check out the comments. Maybe someone has put an idea of a book for someone that you really like down there. And yeah, I think that that's all for this book gift giving guide. I really hope that you found this guide helpful. If you did, please give it a like. If you just enjoyed the video itself, please give it a like. I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't already. I would love to have you back. And I'll talk to you again next time. Bye.